coureurs exceptionnels avec le meilleur pilote du monde et de nombreux animaux.
Welcome to Le Mans, the 47th running of this iconic 24 de Moto. It is, of course, round one of a 2024 season that'll take us to Belgium, Suzuka, and, of course, the Bol d'Or down in the south of France. But for now, it is the Bugatti circuit and a track that we first came to in 1978 for this iconic round. Well, my name's Tom Gaymore, alongside me Simon Patterson. Perfect conditions, but a bit chilly.
Yeah, listening to the sort of initial weather forecast, it looks like it's going to be a bit of a cool one. It's not particularly unusual at Le Mans. It's not somewhere that's known for its tropical warmth, but at least the forecast is saying that the rain is going to stay away, and as we see the grid lining up, blue sky starting to appear.
Yeah, it's been a really busy grid. The dignitaries, the team members, the VIPs, and all the fans lining the grandstand as well. The airport on the left-hand side of that wide shot. And we come on to the start and finish straight. That long, winding right-hander up to the Dunlop chicane, where we saw drama last year. It didn't involve this bike, the Yacht Yamaha. That's the pole-sitting machine. Lap record in qualifying. Nicolo Canepa, the Italian, on that bike. And Simon, he's in the wars, isn't he? Because last month he fell off at Daytona. He says he's not 100% fit, but over one lap, it certainly looks as though he's lost none of his speed.
Over one lap, he certainly performed in yesterday's qualifying session, as I think we're going to hear a little bit from him before we kick off.
Yeah, that's Xavier Simeon on the right-hand side.
So, Nicolo, what a pole position. New lap record. Again, a pole position for the yacht. What's your feeling before the race?
Well, I'm really happy about the lap time of last day. And the bike felt amazing. And also for the race pace, the bike feels really good. We are all three in pretty good lap times. But, you know, 24 hours is always a very long race. And it's always tough. You never know how it's going to end. But also I can say that I will miss it to see your name on the pit board when I try to catch you. So it's going to be a different race without you. But I'm really excited to start this race.
Thank you, Nicolo.
Yeah, Xavier Simeon
and
down on the grid.
The pole sitter never won the race.
New to the Eurosport team, and you were telling me he's running a chocolate shop. Did you say?
He is. He runs a chocolate shop in Andorra. He's one of the MotoGP crew who found themselves in there and has a fantastic little spot in the main street.
Well, that's Caroline de Moraes down on the grid as well.
Guillaume, I've got to ask you, you're the 2023 World Cup winners in the Superstock category. First race of the season here in Le Mans. How confident are the April-Lewitt Moto team?
The confidence is good because the bike have a good fiability. It's very important for this race because the 24 hours is very, very long. After my teammate and me, we have a good lap time for the lap by lap. Is also important for this race, but we have I don't know the condition for this race because the temperature this after night is very cold. It's very important, no crash for a good result for 24 hours. But okay, we have the rider have the experience, the team also, and for me for this race is the principal target is no crash, good time, and I think is the key for the race.
Well, thank you and good luck.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Simone Saltarelli will start that machine. They're not the pole-sitting bike, though, in that Superstock class. That honour goes to the National Motors machine, the red and blue liveried, with a slash of red and blue, the yellow and blue, I should say, with a slash of red. We got lots to talk about in terms of people that have moved around, a bit like musical chairs in the EWC class, but a rider that needs no introduction, one of the biggest names to have jumped ship, Sylvain Guintoli, the 2014 World Superbike champion, of course, two-time EWC World Champion. He's on the B&W Motorrad bike. We've got Dan Limpfert in at Yoshimura Cert. Depugnet and Guarnoni join the KM99 squad, and they are a formidable duo. Randy Depugnet, always a spectacle to watch on a motorbike. So often we say a crash that didn't happen when we see him on screen. Kawasaki to Honda for Tati Team Behringer. Honda with a strong group of teams with the Japanese manufacturer. And Gino Rea, good to see him back on the grid as he comes back from his accident in 2022 at Suzuka. Almost lost his life, but he's back and going very, very quickly. One of the quickest riders in that quartet. And with that 777 lineup, the Wojciech lineup, Kevin Manfredi, we think he's going to start the bike, but he didn't do warm-up earlier because he didn't feel very well. And when you're going into a 24-hour race, Simon, with a team that might be depleted from the start, that's always a bit of well, we'll come back to that question as we look at the city parade. Lots of activities and celebrations go on the week leading up to this iconic 24 Heures de Moto. The bikes and riders in Centreville. There's the cathedral. And that's the square down in Centreville. There used to be a lovely steak restaurant down there called Legends. But it's, like most cities, transformed heavily in the decades since I was there. Qualifying held over 2 sessions, an evening session and a morning session. National Motors on pole in the super stock, and we have a formidable top 3 in the Endurance World Championship lineup as well in the superbikes. Yacht on pole, Yoshimura Cert in second, and the FCC TSR Honda bike in third place. And the rivalry that sort of catches my eye as we look ahead at the start, Josh Hook and Greg Black, the Yoshimura Cert machine and the Yacht bike, they'll be heading up to turn 1 side by side as they were a year ago. And they had that little incident, didn't they, Simon, up at turn 1 where Greg Black and Josh Hook came together, and it was Joshua Hook that came off worst in that little melee.
I mean, how many times have we seen races impacted through that first section at Le Mans on this circuit? It's you go from one of the fastest corners in two-wheeled motorsport into a really tight and difficult little chicane that just funnels everyone into one line and causes absolute chaos before they drop down the hill onto the bridge there.
Whilst we're on the topic of Josh Hook, was injured last year, Mr. Suzuka came back for the Bowl Door, but now we turn our attentions to the pomp and ceremony. Always a bit of a grandstand start here at Le Mans to kick off the 2024 FIM Endurance World Championship season.
C'est génial. Vous touchez là, vous vous rendez compte? C'est à vous. Elle est magnifique. Bien, je sais pas si on a...
Sometimes see the tricolor parachuted in. I'm not sure if we're going to see that this time around, but we'll hear the Marseillaise, the national anthem, of course. And just look at the fans here, packed into the grandstands. "20 minutes until the green flag, or the tricolor, the national flag, here at Le Mans." And yeah, going back to the Kevin Manfredi story, it's not what you want. It's not ideal, is it, Simon?
It's not ideal, and you know, we heard he wasn't feeling very well overnight, so the reason he'll have set up warm-up will be simply to make sure that he's hydrated, make sure that his stomach is settled, try and get some food down to make sure that he's feeling, you know, as up to the challenge as possible. It's not a super difficult one in terms of temperature. It's not, for example, Suzuka, where you're expected to be over 40 degrees, and that physical condition is going to play a huge role. but also at the same time, for the first time ever this year, the Superstock teams are being allowed to run 4 riders, which takes a little bit of the pressure off whenever they're able to substitute in that reserve rider, which in his case will be Gina Rea, just to take a little bit of the pressure off. That is a big difference from the past. It's a smart one because it makes life a little bit easier, and it probably is something that Kevin is very grateful at this point.
There's our celebrity on the grid, Norman Reedus, the actor who will be starting the race. I'm not always terribly clued up when it comes to the actors and the celebrities that we have. Very much stick to the sporting questions when it comes to general knowledge and trivia.
You mentioned the pomp and ceremony of Le Mans, though, and we're getting a great look at it here. I mean, one thing about this race is that the campsite, I think, is the craziest part of it. But if you head to the campsite now, it'll be a ghost town, because all of those people that have crammed in are in the grandstands just to get a look at this starting race. They might not stay there for very long, but they'll be there for the first few laps.
And we'll wheel out our campsite stories as the coverage continues live for the whole 24 hours and the minutes pre-race and post-race as well, including the podium. So wherever you're watching in the world, please do get in touch. You can get in touch with us on X at Tom Gaymore, Gaymor. And what's your Twitter handle?
At Denkmit, Denkmit. That's the story for much later in the night whenever we run out of things to say, Tom.
I'll hold you to that. I'll definitely hold you to that. Look at the Yoshimura cert stuff, and they really do look full factory. Dominic Mayon. So Dominic Mayon handed over the reins to, was Damien Saulnier there at the end? And Mandy Kites, another of the team managers to keep an eye on. We always have a look at the sort of emotion that you see etched on the faces of the team managers as the race unfolds. Everyone has their own story here, and that narrative plays out over the course of 24 hours, and it really is blood, sweat and tears for a lot of the teams and riders. And for those not in contention, that's quite a moustache there. For those not in contention, it's almost a case of, it's the camaraderie, the competition. It's a bit like climbing Mount Everest. It's about just completing the task in hand.
Absolutely. There's 2 totally different types of team on this grid. There's the top 10, and probably the top 5 in Superstock, who are here for no other reason than to win. And if they don't do that, they will be bitterly disappointed. But for everyone else, it's about finishing more than anything else. And, you know, we've seen over the years, we've seen all sorts of stories, all sorts of teamwork across teams. If you break down and you push the bike home, you will get a standing ovation for every team in pit lane as you wheel it up. All of those things really add to the spirit of Le Mans, which is something really special.
This is Dan Linfoot aboard the Yoshimura cert bike, and we'll talk about Dan in a moment. Great to see him on a circuit. Very difficult to get the perfect lap here. It's very technical. There's a lot of corners. Chappelle, Musi, Garage there. We saw him make a mistake there through Chemin-Aubert. For Cordemont's another one where we've seen riders drop the front. Very technical here. You can get around it pretty easy in terms of speed, but to be the quickest, to get that last little bit out of the bike, it's very hard indeed. And this, the trophy presentation that we see at the start of every single year, that Honda machine, something more akin to what I would ride than the Superbike or the Superstock machine, but I'm not sure I'll be trusted with that cargo, Simon.
that lap with Linfoot really showed, you know, the nature of this track. It's almost 2 totally different types of corner, where there's the real hard brake and real late stiff, but then there's all these corners where you really have to flow. You have to keep the rhythm through the section, and if not, you're just going to throw away speed. That makes it, I suppose, a really good circuit for endurance, because rhythm is the name of the game here. But you got a good look at that from that onboard. The other thing that it showed, I thought was just how aggressive some of the curbing is around this circuit. There's big, steep curbs here that you really, really don't want to be running too wide onto, like Dan showed us through the back half of the circuit a little bit.
We've got the tunes on, the trophies arriving, the fans are on their feet. We're about 15 minutes away now to the start of this, the 47th edition of the iconic 24 Heures du Mans.
You said that bike that the trophies arrived on, that Honda, isn't very, isn't much similar to the rest of the grid. But I tell you what, he's under more pressure not to crash than any of the guys lining up for the start here.
Exactly that. That's why, as we listen to the Marseillaise, flares are alight, the fans in full voice. Listen to that atmosphere. If that doesn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, nothing will. Nothing quite like the atmosphere here at Le Mans for this, the iconic 24-hour event. What a moment for those team members down on the grid. And, we touched on it. Dan Linford, what will he be feeling now in those Yoshimura Cert colours?
I mean, there's nothing like being thrown into the deep end, is there?
He said he was a bit nervous, didn't he?
He said he sent us a little message before the start, and he said he was starting to feel the nerves. It's a big, big challenge for any rider to start this race for the Suzuki Endurance Racing Team, for the famous Cert with all their reputation and history.
Norman Reedus. Norman, from Hollywood to the Le Mans 24-hour race. It's your first time here. How have you found the atmosphere so far?
It's exciting. I mean, there's a lot of energy in the air. I feel sort of nervous, and I'm not racing a bike, so I don't know. It feels good. Everybody sing this song. It was awesome. Yeah,
okay.
It was beautiful.
I'm very excited. We're going to do a walk and talk while you go and do the flag. Let me know a little bit about your interest in motorbikes, because I know that it's a big passion of yours.
What was the question?
Motorbikes, big passion of yours. Yeah. Tell me a bit about how it started.
Well, I have a travel show. I travel around the world and ride motorcycles. So we've been Japan and New Zealand, all over the world. I've been doing it about 6 years, that show, but I have 12 bikes. I've been riding since I was in junior high. So,
have you got a little collection, and what are your favorite bikes?
I have an FXR, a couple of FXRs by a company called Power Plant. The show is sponsored by Triumph, so I have a 1200 Rally Pro, a dual sport Tiger that I ride on that show. In Costa Rica, I have a little dirt bike. I just like everything on tour.
I love it. Well, this is a 24-hour endurance race. What are you most excited to see, and what are you expecting?
I want to hear it at night. I want to see and hear it at night. That's going to be, I think that's on my bucket list for the race. But, yeah.
I can tell you, if you come around at 3 a.m., you will see a lot of tired, sleepy mechanics who are just red-eyed and trying to stay awake. But that's what we love, right?
I'm sure there's a lot of, I don't know what the French equivalent to Red Bull is, or if there's Red Bull here, but I'm sure there's a lot of caffeine being down, yes.
Well, we're going to speak to you a little bit later as well in the Cert pit box. So have fun and enjoy the race.
Hell yeah.
When I was racing decades ago in France, There was definitely a shortage of Red Bull. There won't be a shortage up and down the pit lane here, but if you do come back at 3 in the morning, the campsite is the place to go. Norman Reedus there from The Walking Dead talking to Caroline de Mirage, and Caroline will be with us together with this man, Xavier Simeon, for the 24.
How do you feel before the race?
Oh, I'm very excited. I'm a little bit nervous for the first stint, the first race with this incredible team for me here in Le Mans. So obviously we want to bring back the victory for the team. It's very important. But I'm looking forward to the long race. We have a good feeling with the bike and the package for the stint. So Greg is the usual starter. I'm sure he's going to be very fast on the start, and then we can hope to settle into the rhythm, and then hope we have a solid, strong race and bring back the big trophy.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And there's so much of what is the right way to describe this luck that comes into a 24-hour race. They say you don't win a 24-hour race, it chooses you.
The thing is, I always say in racing that the hardest working people are the luckiest. And, you know, we know that the amount of preparation that goes into the sharp end of this grid, that luck comes with it. You know, even before the race, I saw some pictures from the CERT guys where all the rear end of the bike, all the fixings are now colour-coded red and green, port and starboard, just to make sure that a tired mechanic doesn't get things the wrong way around.
The point is the start. It's not at the start that you win the race, but the start, it's an iconic and legendary moment for a rider. All rider want to participate in 24 hours to live that moment. It's an emotional and very difficult moment because it's stressful. You want to make a good start, you want to give the bike in the best position as possible to your teammate, but in the same time, you don't want to make any mistake. Second important point, fuel consumption. It's the key of the race. Some rider will be more aggressive on the gas, other rider more smooth. That's why the engineer will focus with all the data they gain during the private test to make one map that during the race will improve that consumption, because during the race, 24 hours, it's like 27, 28 stops that the team will do. And if you can gain one stop during the race, this is the key to fight for the victory. What you just saw is the third key point, the wheel change. This will be very important during the race, especially in EWC class. It's the velocity of changing the wheels. The EWC class will change the wheels at every stint, and Superstock class will make 3 stints because they don't have this system. They have a Superstock system, and that will be one of the key to win the race.
How good is it to have Xavier Simeon down there? Somebody that we've become accustomed to doing so well over the years in the Endurance World Championship in those CERT colours.
I mean, we saw him interviewing Dan Linfoot there, and Dan is essentially the guy that took over that spot from him. You know, huge amount of experience, absolutely got the credibility in terms of being out there and having done a race winner, a world champion, and a fantastic addition to the team for this year.
Well, it will be Nicolo Canepa, Greg Black, Joshua Hook, Florian Alt, and Ilya Michalek, the top 5 riders. Greg LeBlanc just behind in 6th place. And then you've got Randy Krummenacher stepping up to the Endurance World Championship class as well. A former Supersport rider, world champion, of course, and World Superbike rider. And Florian Marino will be on the KM99 machine in 8th place. Then it's the top stocker, the National Motos machine. Valentin Suchet will be on that bike, as we see Norman Reedus wave the green flag and get ushered out of the way, so to save his blushes as the 33 bikes, 48 I should say, pair off up to the Dunlop chicane. This is the formation lap. The riders will be looking to get a bit of heat into the shoulder of that tyre and the brakes, of course, and then it'll be back to the grid, Simon, where they'll get ready for the famous Le Mans dash.
I think that temperature is going to be a key word for the next 24 hours. Looking at the weather forecast, looking at just how cool it's going to get during the night, and even looking at how cool it is right now, this is an even more important warm-up lap than usual for this race, just to try and get a bit of temperature into them, to make sure that no one does anything stupid in the first few laps whenever there's still a bit of scrabbling for position going on. You can't win the race in the first few laps, but you can certainly finish it.
Top three different manufacturers in the EWC class. We've got the Yamaha, the Suzuki, and of course the Honda. Those top 3 bikes are all on the Bridgestone tyre. In 4th place, we've got the 333 machine. Now that is on the Pirelli, and that will be interesting to see against the Bridgestone and the Dunlop runners, because behind that 333 machine is the lead Dunlop bike, the 37 machine, and that is Ilya Michalek on the BMW. And Sylvain Guintoli was saying that bike is a proper machine. It's got a lot of power and it's very quick.
I mean, so part of the reason that they've brought Sylvain into that project, part of the reason they were able to lure him away from Yoshimura Cert, is that he's taken over as their test rider for Superbikes as well, where Toprak Razgatlioglu is cleaning up
race wins
over there.
Galore.
Absolutely smashing it, and that's coming as part of a real turnaround for BMW in right across the board in terms of production bike racing.
So the bikes back to the start and finish straight. Team members will back them into position. Then there's a circle on the other side of the track. The riders have to have 1 foot in that circle. And then as soon as the flag drops, they'll dash across the track. And over the years, we've seen the Yamaha, the pole-sitting machine, the world champions, very slow away from the standing start. They sort of rectified that last year, but for me, and it may just be me, there's always a bit of a question mark as to whether or not that machine will get off the line cleanly.
We've seen all sorts of problems with it over the years, most of which seems to stem from the way that the clutch on that R1 works. But they've made a bit of a turnaround in the past few years, especially at some of the other races, some of the other 24-hour races, where we've seen them get a bit better off the line. At the end of the day, it's not the most crucial part of the race. Getting away in P1 isn't the key to winning this, but you still don't want to get bogged up in the pack and potentially get caught up in some of the drama that will inevitably go on behind.
We saw Greg Black, Josh Hook come together last year. We've seen Bradley Smith down the road as well over the years at the start. Last year there was a spill further back. It's a very, very tricky part of the race. All eyes on the riders now as they prepare themselves. Josh Hook looks very, very calm and collected, hands on the hips, and you can feel the anticipation, the nerves, as the riders look across at their machines. It's now or never as we get ready for this 47th edition. Under a minute to go. Nicolo Canepa there just flexing his shoulder, the shoulder that he injured a month ago at Daytona. A few question marks over his fitness, especially over the longer stints, but he'll start this race in pole position after a stellar lap in qualifying, a lap record for the Yamaha machine, a 10th quicker than Karel Haneke's previous time. Crowd counting down now. The riders fully focused on what they need to do. Watch for the tricolor in the middle. As the flag waves, we're green in France. And straight away, it's Greg Black who's going to lead up to turn 1 on the Yoshimura Cert machine. I think Canepa's going to slot into 3rd place, as Joshua Hook's got in and amongst it as well as they head up to Dunlop curve cleanly. So far, so good. It is the Suzuki, the Honda, then the pole-sitting Yamaha in 3rd place, and the whole field tiptoeing through the first left and right right corners, down to Chappelle for the opening lap. And that is very much what we wanted to see. Little in the way of drama. And expect Nicolo Canepa just to settle in now in third place, as he has Greg LeBlanc, who sticks it up the inside. Did he stand Canepa up there? I'm not sure, but the green machine, the Kawasaki, now up to third place. And Canepa just getting bullied out of it there as they head down to Garage Fair for the first time.
I think with that long sit on the grid, you know, over in a minute and a half from the end of the cycle lap, and with the low temperatures today, people were going to be careful off the line, and we saw that. That was one of the most tentative Le Mans starts I've ever seen, I think. But it's you know, it's panned out well for the lead group. None of them are willing to take risks, and I think that maybe Canepa could have been a bit more forceful there as he defended against LeBlanc. But at the same time, you got to think that he's thinking in the big picture right now. He has no interest in getting caught up in a dogfight. Whenever they're certainly going to be believing, you know, carrying that #1 plate, that they've got the pace over the whole race to easily see off the Kawasaki challenge.
And as we've seen now with the reigning champions, they've learned that if they're to win and stand on the top step at the end of the year, they can't afford to drop points in these big races. We'll have points at 3 different stages here, the 8, the 16, and of course the 24-hour period. Is Canepa straight away back up the inside of Greg LeBlanc, up to the Dunlop chicane, now down the hill to Chappelle, as we look on board the drone cam that we have for you, new for 2024, gives us a fabulous insight of the layout. And that was a good move by Canepa. Didn't take too much of a risk, and he looks fast. He's able to put that Yamaha machine anywhere he wants now. Josh Hook is the machine ahead of him, the Honda, the FCC TSR Honda. Don't forget now that the top 3 bikes all on the Bridgestone tyre, and over the years this Bridgestone tyre has got stronger and stronger in terms of its operating window. It's just got more and more versatile, which was always its Achilles heel at Le Mans, the cold temperatures.
It already looks like Canepa's, you know, being held up a little bit here by Hook. He's looking down the road, he's seeing Greg Black, who we're on board with, and I think there's probably no one in this race as experienced as starting a Le Mans race, especially at the sharp end, as Greg Black. So Canepa's aware that they can't let him get too far away, and he's going to have to try and put a move on Hook before too long, just to keep that gap manageable, because, yeah, I know it's lap 1, but you don't want to let it get away from them.
He's very much underrated, Greg Black. 2-time world champion, born in Derby, but very French-sounding, French-speaking. It's almost the other way around with Sylvain Guintoli, isn't it? As Guintoli now resides in Derbyshire, and very, very eloquent with his English. And there you've got Greg Black, who resides in France, from Derby. Very French-sounding, but it's not unfair for me to say he's been underrated over the years, because he's as good as any of the biggest names on this grid.
Greg's had a bit of a strange career where he's an English rider who's made his life, his story in France, and as a result he's very much largely unknown to a British audience, despite, you know, how incredibly successful he's been, how many world championships and race wins he's racked up with that cert team. You're right in saying that him and Sylvain almost have opposite stories. They've almost met in the middle a little bit with going in each other's directions. But, you know, despite being raised in France, Greg comes from English parents. He is very much English, and it's quite funny actually listening to him and Sylvain discussing, because they flick back and forth between real proper French and very Derbyshire accented English. It's quite comic.
The pole-sitting machine, the Yamaha Yacht bike, has made easy work of Josh Hook in third place and has now set his sights on the race leader, Greg Black. And already that Yacht Yamaha, look at the mid-corner speed of that bike. And Canepa up the inside at Recordermont. Don't want to tuck the front here, very easy to do. And he's able to release the brake, pick the bike up, and he'll head up now to lead his first lap at this 2024 24 du Mans. Greg Black comes back at him, just sticks his foot out as well, just to say thank you very much. And Canepa's having none of it.
Oh, I got the impression there that maybe Greg wasn't just delighted about how aggressive that move was that early on in the race. I think that foot out was a bit of a warning to Canepa to calm it down more than anything else. But
he didn't listen.
He didn't listen. He's straight back at him. But yeah, these two are going at it harder. Maybe maybe than I would have expected them to at this point in the race. And I think, you know, Greg trying to calm it down a little bit is a sign of his experience at this point. It's a sign of him saying, this isn't how you go about it. And that's not to say that Nicolo Canepa doesn't have the experience, but he comes from a different background, you know. There's a psyche, I think, to being an endurance racer, a career endurance racer that Greg Black has that maybe some of the guys he's dicing with don't quite have.
Canepa's pushing on, little wobble under the brakes. Down into Gary Fair, used all the exit curve on the run up to Chemin-Aubert as well. Canepa means business here. He's got his head down. Look how much road he's using on the exit there as well. He wants to break away from the threat of that Yoshimura cert machine. He wants to flex the muscles out front. And it's, like you say, very much a different psyche, isn't it, between Greg Black and Nicolo Canepa. Canepa came from that World Superbike sprint race background. Greg Black's very much cut his teeth in the endurance world, and getting from the start of your stint to the finish in the quickest way is important. It's that green flag average that they talk about in endurance racing as we see the first crash of the day. That's the 199 that has gone down further back. We're going to have a look now as to exactly how that happened. Is that down at Chappelle?
Yeah, it is an easy place to get caught out at this point in the race.
I think that's the Artec bike.
As we see Canepa go back again. And the funny thing is, you know, the thing that you'd think Greg Black is going to be screaming in his helmet about at the minute is that every time the two of these guys trade places for this lead, Hook gets a little bit closer behind them. This could be a three-horse race that none of them really want very quickly.
Canepa doesn't want to race. He wants to get to the front, and he wants to lead this race. And they feel at Yamaha, if they can get to the front, they can control their own pace then. Whereas if you're the chaser, it's very much 10/10, isn't it?
You're always trying to chase someone else's rhythm, and it's a hard thing to do. Especially, you know, I think that the other thing that they're going to be considering is we know that CERT are the masters when it comes to pit stops. Whenever it comes to the first of those stint changes, whenever they have to refuel and change tires, you would expect Suzuki to just start eking out a little bit of a lead at that point, and CERT want to exit. Yart want to exit ahead of CERT whenever it comes to that, as we see team boss Mandy Katz there.
He didn't look too calm. He's only got about, you know, 23 hours and 52 minutes to go.
The best thing about Mandy Katz, about the Yart boss, is that you have all these team bosses who are very stoic and very sensible, and then you've got Mandy, whose face tells all his emotions. As us watching it at home, it's fantastic.
The best was Gilles Staffler.
Yes, that is very true.
He was brilliant. Nicknamed the Wolf because he had one look. And, you know, I remember Terry Reimer sitting in this booth with me. And if you know Terry Reimer, he's not really scared of anyone. Most people are scared of him. But he always said, Gilles Staffler, you didn't mess with Gilles. And, you know, he had one face, whatever happened. And, yeah, very difficult to raise a smile out of. But Mandy Katz there, who would be a team manager? Because your blood pressure, your heart rate would be going through the roof, and that's because Nicolo Canepa is definitely pushing on. I mean, that lap time there, a 1:36.7, is very quick for this point in the race. Don't forget, full tanks on these bikes, and of course this tyre has to do a whole stint. It's not a qualifying tyre, so yeah. When I talk about qualifying tyres, obviously, oh, who's that further back? It's the Matisse.
It's the Matisse.
The experimental bike is down, and that's a real shame.
That, whoa, big high side. And, you know, I don't know what happened to them at the start. I did notice they had a fantastic qualifying this year in P14, but at the end of the first lap, they were way down, like 36th place. Oh, that's Josh Hook.
That, as we were seeing,
third place man.
So the Matisse is going again, and that is Josh Hook. So that's real drama in the opening 10 minutes of this Le Mans 24-hour. Josh Hook on the FCC TSR Honda, and I think that was down at Recordement. We were watching Gabriel Pons on the Matisse bike at Garage Vert, and the third place bike, Josh Hook, we saw him in the wars last year, and that's real heartache. He's 26th now. He's got back up and running, but is there any damage to him, and is there any damage to the machine?
I mean, if you're going to crash anywhere here, that's probably the best place to do it because it's nice and slow. But you know, he looked for a while like someone that was just trying a little bit too hard to hang on to those two in front. They were setting a pace that he wasn't comfortable with, and the only reason he was really able to stick with Canepa and Black was because they were dicing with each other. But maybe just a little bit too much too early on, and they're paying the price for it now.
And that's what I said when Canepa was pushing on. I said he's trying to break the back of this challenge, trying to bully one of the riders into a mistake as Gabriel Pons, and he's done well to get back on that bike. Joe Ackroyd had a high side on that machine in testing at Chemin-Aubœuf in the wet weather, and you should see the bruise he's got on his backside. For that
belly pan replacement at least, because obviously that belly pan is a part that they have to have on the bike for safety reasons, because it catches the oil if anything happens to the engine.
Now, has Josh Hook gone in? We'll keep an eye on that, or is he staying out? He's staying out. So like you say, it's the best place to go down. The damage is on the right-hand side of that bike, so he's obviously tucked the front as he's gone into Recordement. We saw Canepa take the lead down there. It's very easy to tuck the front. See Randy de Pugna do it over the years. Mike D'Amelio as well. Such an innocuous corner. Slowest corner on the circuit, but so easy to make a mistake. And the track surface changes there, of course, because you come across the Circuit de la Sarthe.
Yes, and it tends to be a bit dustier and a bit greener there, even though these guys have been out practicing on it all weekend. The one good thing for Hook is that, you know, this is probably the best time in the race to crash. There's still a pack, there's still lots of markers to pick off to build your way back through the lead. I'd certainly rather do it now, whenever you've got bikes in front to chase down, than do it, you know, in the middle of the night, whenever you're all out on your own, and trying to close that lead down again is a bit more of a floating thing.
The entry speed that Greg Black's capable of carrying through the bank corner, it's the mid-corner speed of the Yamaha that's really impressive, that rolling speed. But actually, the amount of confidence Greg Black's got on the front end of that Yoshimura Cert bike is keeping him in the fight.
I mean, that's exactly what you'd expect of the Yamaha. That's always been the strength of the R1. But it's really, really impressive to see, you know, what is essentially a geriatric Suzuki at this point, holding on to them.
And that's been a really interesting story to follow over the years, because they had the success in MotoGP, then pulled out, and we didn't know what was going to happen here to the Suzuki, the factory Suzuki squad in Endurance World Championship. And then late in the day, they found the partnership with Yoshimura, and Cert got the backing they needed from Suzuki somewhat to make sure that they were out there. And they're a stalwart at the championship, so it was a really difficult time. Then they bounced back last season and were really, really impressive. And they're starting off 2024 where they left off, because that Yacht Yamaha, that R1, is seriously quick. Reigning world champions, of course.
But what's really interesting is we know that Suzuki pulled out of basically all their racing activities in an official capacity when they withdrew from the MotoGP, from World Endurance. But I've just been sent a photograph from the grid of former MotoGP project leader Shinichi Sahara, who's in Le Mans.
Wow.
We know that they're coming back in the experimental class at Suzuka later this year to run a bike that's very much focused on sustainability in terms of tyres and fairings and oils, lubricants, lots of interesting things that they're doing with a real forward-thinking vision there. But interesting to see Sahara back in the grid too.
Greg Black had a big look over his shoulder coming out of Chemin-Aubœuf. He'll be shocked to see no Josh Hook there. There's Florian Alt on the 333 in the Honda colours as well, Viltes. So the FCC TSR Honda dropping back, but Honda still there in third place, albeit with the Viltes machine. What's happening further back in Superstock? Well, Honda's leading there as well with Valentin Suchet on board that National Motors bike. He's 8th overall, and he's got Kenny Foray behind him on the number 9 machine, the Tecmas B&W. Kenny Foray sharing that with with Loic Arbel and Jan Boer.
Josh Hook making fairly steady progress up through the rankings now. He rejoined in 26th. He's now up to 23rd. So, you know, like we said, this is a good time to be able to pick your way back through the field again, through the chaos of the opening laps. But, man, he's still got a long way to go to close down this lead. He's lost 30 seconds in that crash.
Fifth place machine, Florian Marino behind Greg LeBlanc. The Kawasaki there up in 3rd place. In 3rd place in the Stockers, Kevin Manfredi, who's lost 2nd place to Kenny Foray last lap. But Manfredi, who was feeling unwell, missed warm-up on that Vocek machine. That's the Vocek machine that Danny Webb's on, and of course Gino Rea as well.
They're running impressively. You know, they weren't that far forward in qualifying. They've made a good jump, and considering someone that was too ill to run in warm-up this morning, I think Manfredi's doing a decent job. He's obviously going to try and get his fast stints out of the way early on, and then, you know, he's got a bit of time. He's got, because of that new structure in the Superstock class that lets them run 4 riders, at least it means that he gets 3 hours to relax, maybe a bit more if they jig around the schedule. So there could be a chance that he's volunteered to jump off or jump on it early and get it out of the way.
Another Stocker down in the gravel. That's the Team Racing 85 by Celine bike. And that was a fairly hefty off for Christian Napoli. Now, he's going to be on the wrong side of the circuit, so if they do recover that bike back to pit lane, that's going to take an absolute eternity. So not only has he gone down heavily, he's going to lose a huge amount of time recovering that bike back to pit lane. We did see a glimpse of the Tati Team Behringer Racing bike. Now, the big story for them, Kawasaki to Honda. There it is, the number 4. You can just see the white machine. Where's he off to? He's in the gravel. Commentator's curse. I can't believe it.
He's got a little bit caught up there, trying to find a way through that pack. He's completely missed his braking marker, and you know what? He's done quite lucky to stay on the bike there in the gravel trap. I thought for a second that he was going overboard.
Because you come off the lip of that corner, so they're trying to go around the Pompier bike. That's a Stocker. Randy Krumenack, a former world Supersport champion and experienced on the super bike, very lucky to stay on that machine. And, well, I feel sorry for mentioning them now because my curse has undone all of the good work that Randy Krumenack had put in. He's just dropping down now to 10th overall as we see the recovering Celine bike. That's Mr. Napoli venturing back, but he's got a long way to make it back to, unless he can get back on the track here. Will they allow him back onto the circuit? No, they won't. So we won't be seeing him for a while. But I have to say, Greg Black is not letting Nicolo Canepa get away. Now, this will start to maybe play into the hands of Greg Black because there's question marks over Canepa's fitness, and riding this hard on a superbike in the sunshine at Le Mans. They always say Le Mans is a bit of a difficult circuit. We've got nowhere to rest. This is going to be interesting to see how fit Nicolo Canepa is over a Stidney.
I mean, there's only really one straight on this track, and it leads into one of the scariest corners in motorbike racing. So there's not much of a chance to get a breather here. And you'd imagine that, you know, maybe the reason we saw Canepa pushing so hard early on is that he started the race with a little bit of painkillers to try and numb that shoulder that he smashed in Daytona a few weeks ago, with the intention of getting a bit of a break, getting away at the front and being able to relax a little bit before the first stop. But Greg Black just isn't giving him the opportunity to do that. And, you know, you can see just how well or how fast these two are pushing on. Whenever you look further down the field and see that Florian Arndt is now 7 seconds behind Greg Black after only a handful of laps completed.
Multiple French Superbike champion Kenny Foray has just hit the front in the Superstock class. There he is aboard the Tecmas BMW. All of the Stockers on the Dunlop tyre, so they don't have a tyre war in this World Cup or stock class. but they definitely have a manufacturer war.
Of Kermenacher, that there was a bit of a war going on with that group, and maybe he's just made a little bit of mistake that we didn't see on camera as they diced for that position, that's let Foray get through and just start to try and break the group a little bit now.
Well, he's a world endurance champion, so Kenny Foray is an experienced fellow at the head of this class. The Frenchman now 7th overall, ahead of the Italian Kevin Manfredi and the Swiss rider Valentin Suchet aboard the National Motors. Now, National Motors are a real success story in the stock class, aren't they? The stalwarts of the class, and if you have lived in France or spent time on the road network in France, you'll be familiar with the National Motors brand and what they do, almost like the RAC or the AA to the French road network. It's changed over the years since they became a Honda bike or team. They've got that Honda factory backing, which has changed the livery ever so slightly. It used to be a lot more blue and yellow. They've got a bit of red in there now and white.
They were for a long time a kind of a Honda Superbike satellite team who were always there. Maybe not necessarily delivering amazing results, but they were always present. They were always a dark horse. They've had a whole litany of riders over the years, both big names in France and big names elsewhere. I remember Michael Rudder riding for them a few years back. But then they made the switch to the Superstock class and really embraced it, really committed to it. And to give Honda their credit, Honda then decided, well, if they're going to step up and take on the class, we'll back them. They gave them the factory backing in it, and it's delivered results since then.
And the mechanics from the company actually are the mechanics that you'll see in the pit box as well. I think that's a wonderful story. They bring people up on almost like an apprenticeship, if you like, into that race team. And yeah,
which is a fantastic advertisement as well if you need your bike repaired on the side of a French motorway.
Oh, Nicolo Canepa there, just leaning on all the electronics coming out of Recordement onto the start and finish straight, just easing away from Greg Black. This is the biggest we've seen the gap at all over this opening stint, but he's still pushing on, Nicolo Canepa. Canepa leaning on those electronics coming out of the final corner, and that just shows the confidence that he's got in that machine. And we touched on that earlier on. Canepa we've seen using all the road and a little bit more. He's been pushing on, but Greg Black as well. So much front end on that Yoshimura Cert bike, really attacking the corner entry, and both of these riders riding on the crest of a wave in terms of their commitment. As teammates look on.
Canepa's pushing the pace here, but he has extended that lead out to 0.8 of a second, which is the biggest we've seen it. But Black is still not far away from him, and it's testament to the job that Black's doing to stick with him. That it's the lead back to third that's really being stretched out now. 8.3 seconds from Black back to Florian Alt, 9.1 to Canepa, as they just really put the pressure on at the front and try and get away.
Looks like Etienne Masson will be next on that Yoshimura Cert bike with Dan Limpfert thereafter. Florian Alt is the rider in third place, and I mention this every time. He's got Control-Alt-Delete on the back of his leathers.
You would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, simple things for simple minds, but I always find that quite funny whenever I see that. If you use a MacBook, you won't know what that means, but if you're brought up in the 90s working on a PC, you know exactly what that means. But, of course, Florian Alt, World Cup winner, Red Bull Rookies winner as well, Bol d'Or winner. I don't think he's ever won here, though, but he's a former IDM Superbike champion, so he knows his way around a Superbike.
I mean, we've seen this strange thing over the year with the Red Bull Rookies Cup, the feeder class into MotoGP, where some of the guys from it have gone on to immediate success. We're talking like people like Pedro Acosta, people like Johan Zarco. Then there's others who've come out of it and kind of struggled a little bit to find their feet and to find a place. Haven't really caught it in the Grand Prix class, but it's quite funny how many of them have found a spot in endurance racing, actually, because we've got both Florian Alt and Karl Haneke, another ex-Red Bull Rookie champion, who are both, leading figures now in this series.
Alain Teixeira was third in the Red Bull Rookies Cup as well. Look at this.
Oh, that 85 bike is just absolutely trashed.
And look, how long have we been talking for? That it's still nowhere near back to pit lane. It's a long trudge back. And I always feel sorry for the riders in this Endurance World Championship. When you make a bit of a Horlicks out of it, you've got to go back to the garage and everyone's kind of looking at you saying, well, what have you done? And you must feel like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders.
What's even worse, I did Le Mans more than 10 years ago as part of a team, and at the 22-hour mark, we'd only 2 hours left to go. Our rider went through turn 3 and the chain snapped, and he had to push all the way back, and he'd only just started his stint, so there was a full tank of fuel. It was hot because it was getting close to the end of the race. You know, the physicality that you need. Can you imagine doing something like that after a 22-hour day at work? It's incredible. So, yeah, I don't envy any of them for it.
Close to tears, I'm sure, at that point. We haven't seen much of that BMW, William Michalak. Now, he's normally very, very quick around here. I wonder if they're tyre limited. Of course, that BMW on the Dunlop shod tyre. Now, the top 3, although they're now 2 because Josh Hook has dropped it down the road and is recovering up in 17th now, so he's almost made 10 spots from where he ended up. But the top 2 are Bridgestone shod tyres. Now, I just wonder if that Dunlop will come into its own. As we've seen over the years, when the temperature drops, they have not that peak performance that Bridgestone have, but they have that bigger operating window. And it's going to be 1 degree here overnight.
It's going to be so cold in a few hours. The Bridgestones now, you know, since they left MotoGP, they focused all of their attention, not even on this championship, but on the Suzuki at R. That was their #1 race after they stepped out of MotoGP and Michelin took over. It has gradually expanded to the point where they realised that you can't just expect the top teams to jump onto your tyres for 1 round when they've got a championship to run, and that's been good for endurance across the board, with, you know, with a bit more investment and a bit more technology into super grippy rubber that gives excellent feedback, but maybe doesn't quite last as long as the Dunlop tyres, which have a reputation as being harder, being more rigid, but as a result lasting longer. So, you know, we're talking about them maybe coming into themselves as the temperature drops later in the race. It could also be that it starts to come into themselves a little bit more as the stint runs on, and as we see the Bridgestone start to fade a little bit ahead of the first pit stops.
And you mentioned Suzuka there, the temperature, that kind of thing. I remember when I first started and Bridgestone were operating in GP and a lot of their development was at Suzuka, when it really got cold here at Le Mans. I mean, it was almost unrideable, that Bridgestone tyre. They've done so much work over the years to get that tyre to work in these sort of Le Mans temperatures.
I mean, we're going to see air temperatures overnight of, like you say, 1 or 2 degrees. I've been at Suzuka and seen air temperatures of 45 degrees. The temperature range that they had to work at was massive, and this was back in the days more than now, where, you know, they were building a tyre for Suzuka because that was the race that mattered. Philosophy, they put a lot more effort into what we're seeing right now, and it is paying off because the tyres are getting better. You know, at cold Le Mans, at red hot, super humid Suzuka, at, you know, the high temperature sunny sunshine that we're going to see whenever we go to the Ball d'Or later in the year, and, you know, even at whatever could come at Spa, because let's be honest, the Spa circuit could throw absolutely anything at us whenever we head there in the second week of June.
You're watching the battle for 4th overall. Florian Marino on the 99 on the Yamaha, leading Ilya Michalek on the 37, the factory BMW, with Greg LeBlanc in the background there, 3rd on screen. He's 6th overall on the green machine, the Kawasaki. Now, Florian Marino sharing that bike with Jeremy Guarnoni, who knows the Kawasaki very, very well, of course, having made the switch now to that 99 machine. But also in that squad's Randy De Pugna. I love watching Randy ride around here, just backing the bike in absolutely everywhere. It looks like he's this close to a crash whenever we see him on the machine. But very, very quick. And, of course, Randy De Pugna, 43 years old now.
I had to double check just before we started the race how old Randy was these days. I'm much more used to seeing him these days in this role, sitting in the commentary box at the MotoGP races. But fair play to him for, you know, clearly loving his racing still and finding a niche that I think probably comes a little bit easier whenever you're French, given just how much the French love their endurance racing.
Ilya Michalek sharing with Sylvain Guintoli. We've touched on that. Markus Reiterberger. Now, Reiterberger had a crash in the second qualifying yesterday. And Reiterberger, we talked about talented riders coming up the ladders. Reiterberger was somebody that came across from IDM back in the day. I remember when he arrived in World Superbike, there was so much hype around him. It was like almost like Van der Mark. It almost, and I'm not being unfair on Van der Mark, all right, but it didn't. You know, there was so much hype.
Yeah.
Sort of top rack hype, but
just
it didn't work out,
did it?
Reiterberger beat himself up badly in the World Superbike Championship. Had a big falls, banged his head a few times. But he's found a home for himself in endurance racing. The Matisse back out and running there on screen. That's good to see. But Reiterberger, big, lanky, I think it's right in saying, big rider, and somebody that is very, very talented when the bike is right and the conditions suit him. Super, super quick.
It's good to see that endurance has become a bit of a home for people who, you know, just haven't quite found their path in other series. Obviously, the fact that there's so many spots in the grid here is helping, because it's not just one bike. There's an opportunity to ride. But as the credibility of this championship has rose, as we've seen more factory interest, I think that, you know, pretty much every factory has run a factory team of one sort or another in this over the recent years. Certainly more than we've seen in, say, Superbikes or MotoGP, with, you know, entries that traditionally you'd never associate with endurance, like Ducati, like BMW returning now. There's been this real strong increase in interest in it, and it's paying off for guys. It's really, really, really good to see, because at the end of the day, for us fans at home, it makes for better racing, because you're getting real big, talented riders.
Oh, Josh Hook has just made a mistake at Chemin-Aubert. He was trying to pass Randy Krummenacher. There's a couple of stockers in that battle as well. And Krummenacher goes high and wide around the outside there of that bank corner. We've already seen him in the gravel. But these two riders on track together. Krummenacher on the number 4 Honda. So used to seeing that number 4 as a green machine. It looks weird as a white Honda now, but there he is, Krummenacher in 11th place over the line. Josh Hook now up to 10th on the FCC TSR Honda. How far off the lead? He's only 42 seconds off the lead. Bearing in mind he's been down the road, he is pushing on. A 1:36.9 last time around, that's his fastest lap. 1:38.3 last time around. You know, bearing in mind he has so much traffic, he's going he's doing the leader's pace.
And you got to think that, you know, Krummenacher will recognise that. He kind of got through that little group there as Hook made a door for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if he just manages to latch on and closes in on those other Superstock bikes in front of him in process.
So the team manager of the FCC TSR bike has been summoned to race control. That's like the headmaster's office. If you're unfamiliar to motorsport, if you get summoned to race control, it's a bit like being summoned to the headmaster's office at school. You've got to wait outside, and they've normally got something to say to you, of which you've got to present your case.
It's entirely possible that there's been a bit of damage done to that number 5 bike that we've not spotted, and that's why they're being summoned up to race control. Just to be informed, you need to fix this right now.
Well, there's the Soline machine that we saw go down the road, the Team Racing 85 bike. Such a long slog back for poor old Christian Napoli. I mean, he's been going 15 minutes now. Yeah. Just don't envy him at all. And don't forget, they'll have to fix that bike. He'll have a rest, I think. They won't put him back out on it.
Oh, it depends how pissed they are
exactly.
for causing the crash, you know. Depends on the mood in the garage very much.
Yeah. Go and put your wrongs right. Now, Nicolo Canepa starting to eke out that gap. Greg Black just 0.8 of a second behind, very much in it. A 1:36.8 last time around for Canepa, 1:36.5 for Greg Black. So Greg Black 0.3 quicker on that last lap. And these front two now, 13 seconds ahead of the 333 machine. That's Florian Alt on that bike. I think that's a Pirelli shod Yamaha. And then Florian Marino behind on the 99. It looks as though Randy de Pugnet getting ready in that garage. And this is the next question mark. How long will they go? We tend to see teams and riders a little bit conservative on the first stint. Don't want to run out of fuel, although we've seen the ERC Ducati do that over the years here. We don't want to run out of fuel on the first stint. But which manufacturer has got the advantage when it comes to fuel mileage? Because that extra lap or two as you ramp up the number of pit stops 24 hours into the race, it amounts to a huge percentage of time. As there we see Christian Napoli trudging back. I mean, he will be absolutely exhausted. And what you tend to see also at Le Mans, the camaraderie, the teams will be clapping this duo back up the pit lane. It's lovely to see when you see that.
There's a certain irony to him being sponsored by a medical centre, because he very much looks like he needs one, not because of the crash, but because of the long push back.
Yeah, it's a horrible, horrible sight to see that, because you just know the mental pain and the physical pain as well. As 37 minutes into this race, 22 laps completed, and we're not far away from the first set of pit stops.
Yeah, there's still going to be a big question mark. There's a big question mark every year as we go into the pit stops about just who's been able to do what in terms of fuel economy, how many laps of an advantage you might get, or who's going to come out of the pits a little bit stronger in terms of how they're managing it. It's a big question mark. It's one that the teams will have kept their cards close to their chest all through practice with. No one's going to have been doing full stint simulations just in case it gives away any information. So we're going to get a bit of a surprise. I remember a few years ago the CERT guys really stunning the rest of the grid by just keeping going as everyone else pulled into the pits. And we're seeing Black actually just on the fastest lap of the race. He's closing down that gap a little bit. He was doing that, you'd imagine, just thinking about the pit stops coming up and about knowing that their team is going to do a good job in the pits, and maybe there's an opportunity to lead this race in the next 20 minutes if he is smart tactically here.
It's a huge psychological blow as well if they can go longer at this pace than the Yacht machine. Yamaha, Austria Racing, Yamaha of course. Nicola Canepa siding through the traffic as they head up to this banked right-hander. Where's Greg Black in that melee? Traffic's always a bit of a headache for the riders because, and we touched on this before we came on air, it's a bit of a spectrum between the experience and the speed of the riders on the grid. And that's what makes Le Mans so special. But when there is that discrepancy in experience and talent, lapped riders can do weird and wonderful things, Simon. We've seen it over the years. They don't tend to do what you expect them to do. And when you're the faster rider coming up, as we saw with Randy Krummenacher, very easy to make a mistake.
Absolutely. All you have to do is look on the qualifying results, and you see that there's a gap of like 10 seconds between the first guy and the last. And whenever you're catching those guys, that 10 seconds is a huge speed difference. I'm just wondering actually if that fastest lap from Greg Black was just because he saw that group of traffic in front of him and was him thinking, you know what, I'm just going to try and close the door to Canepa a little bit. And then it means that whenever you're picking your way through the bikes in front, it's Canepa that has to do the work. It's him that has to kind of let those slower machines know that he's coming. And if Black's clever, he can just slide along with them, make the most out of it, and have to do the least amount of work, which, looking at where they are right now, is actually exactly what's happened, because he's closed the gap right down again to half a second.
When you talk to the riders, because this is not the best floodlit circuit out of them all, the real sort of Jaws music, if you like, is when they see the headlights at night come up the inside of them. You don't know where the rider is, but you know they're there.
But it's weird, even from whenever I was doing Le Mans 10 years ago with a team, the difference from then to now is that back then the guys just always say they knew when the factory guys were coming. because they had big, bright, super lit up headlights, and you could see this huge patch of light coming behind you, and you thought, oh, it's one of the top guys, I'll make a bit of room. But I think these days, because of the complete proliferation of LED technology, suddenly everyone has great lights now, so you don't even get the advantage anymore of knowing that it's one of the fast guys coming.
We saw a glimpse of the Yacht pitboard there as well, and that's another sort of illumination that looks fantastic at night, is the pitboards here at Le Mans. It really does resemble Blackpool illuminations if you've ever been there, northwest of the UK. And look at the gap. Greg Black has caught right up to the back now of Nicolo Canepa. We saw Etienne Masson looking on there. He just looks like he's got his head in the game, doesn't he? Looks very serious, very focused. I think he'll be next on the bike.
Yeah, I don't think we've got a glimpse yet of who's going to be next on the Yacht bike. We're starting to see people appearing in their leathers now to get a bit of an understanding of who's going out, but no shot yet of whether or not it'll be Marvin Fritz or Karl Haneke that takes over from race leader Nicolo Canepa in probably about another 14 minutes or so, maybe.
The TRT27 AZ Stocker is the first to stop, and just who's come out on that bike? No other than Michael Dunlop. 25 TT wins, raced here 11 years ago. He sounded like he was really looking forward to it.
That makes me feel old. I was there the last time he raced. Yeah. Then we were there for that one. You know, for the TT guys, this is fantastic preparation for the Isle of Man. It's lots and lots of miles on a bike. It's physical without being intense. It's good practice from, you know, all those muscles that you only work when you're on a motorbike. This is like it's like doing a marathon, really, instead of doing a sprint like you get if he was to go to, say, the British Superbike Championship, which has been the other traditional form of pre-season preparation for the TT.
Yeah, and he sort of, when you heard him speak in the week leading up to this, relishes the physical opportunity. Now, we've just seen Greg Black get a little bit balked there, and you can lose so much time just that one bike getting in between Canepa and Greg Black, and you can just see how the gap has changed there. But yeah, Michael Dunlop relishing the physical and very much the mental challenge of this race. You know, you have to go somewhere mentally to deal with the sort of physical exertion, but also in the middle of the night when it's you can't see where you're going. There's just so many similarities, although they're sort of differences to the TT.
And there's been a long history of really, really fast guys from the Isle of Man TT, very much using endurance both as preparation and as something to keep them sharp with in between, you know, what is quite a limited season over there. We've seen guys like Steve Hislop, Carl Fogarty, all of those guys, you know, used endurance racing as a key part of their TT preparation. And even more recently, you know, let's not forget, Honda actually ran a factory-backed team in this championship called Honda TT Legends that was all about keeping the likes of John McGuinness, Cameron Donald, Keith Moore sharp and ready to go racing.
Nicolo Canepa leads its Yacht Yamaha ahead of the Yoshimura Cert bike. Greg Black just seems to be able to bring that bike back up to the back of the Yamaha machine. I think that's the 333 that is in. If that is the case, it is. No, it's the 53. So scrap that. On delivery.
That was a very relaxed looking pit stop for a team at the sharp end.
Exactly that. So scrap what I was saying. The 333, the Honda still in third place. Florian Alt there ahead of Florian Marino on the Yamaha as we start to see the Stockers stopping. Now the Stockers will stop before the EWC machines. And that's the 111 Avio bike.
Of course, one of the changes that's been brought in over the last few years in this championship is that you now have to be stopped for 30 seconds when you come in for a pit stop. which just takes a little bit of the pressure off. And I think a sensible safety move that, because it just means that things, you have a little bit more time, a little bit more rhythm. There's not the same chaotic energy that there used to be in the past. And it probably prevents a few of the spills and catastrophes we've seen while the bikes have been standing still over the years.
Kenny Foray still leads in the stock class on the BMW, 7th overall. Josh Hook is 8th overall. And then in 2nd place, who's just pitted, was that Avio bike. So that's the Aprilia, the Samuele Cavalieri on that bike now, the Italian. And that Aprilia had got itself up into the top spots in the stock class before it stopped. Obviously thirsty, though, because it stopped before the others.
It's an early pit stop. But it's been quite interesting talking to Aprilia about this endurance project, because it's got real factory back into it. They, you know, the head of their racing program, Massimo Rivola, has spoken quite a bit about it, how they see the future of production bike racing being superstock spec. They think that superbikes are too expensive, they're too different from the road machines, and they'd much rather go in this direction full stop. So they're kind of eschewing the World Superbike Championship, where they used to have a really big factory effort, and instead they're dabbling here with a superstock project.
Greg Black just making a mistake, passing the back marker at Chemin-Aubert, went in a bit deep, stood the bike up and ran through that second element. That wasn't really a huge issue. Look, he stands the bike up, he knows he's going deep, and the riders can do that, and that just shows his pedigree. He's not going to pinch the front brake or take too much of a risk. He knows he's in too deep now, and he just stands it up and uses that runoff road to mitigate against any big disaster. Lost a bit of time, and that's all he's lost, because very easy to drop the bike. Now, foot out, the lead stocker is in. That's Kenny Foray, as we see the double nine in from 3rd place in the EWC class. So the Yamaha, the first to blink at the top of the times. The 333 Honda in as well. But this is the lead Superstock, the BMW. That's early for the KM99 and the 333 Vilters machine. Very conservative, given their pace at the front of the field. Nicolo Canepa and Greg Black staying out. They got a huge lead, 20 seconds the lead, and textbook stuff. As I say that, couldn't get the BMW started, but finally they did.
It'll be interesting to see if that, you know, little bit of worry or conservatism with the fuel economy is something that applies to the factory bike as well, because obviously it's a bit of a new addition this year to the championship, and we're not quite sure how it'll do in the pit stop, as we see another faller at the last corner, and he really didn't get away with it the way that Josh Hook did he? There's going to be a bit more damage in that number 56 bike.
Hannes Sommer taking over from Kenny Foray on the BMW. All eyes now on just who's going to go longer at the top. Nicolo Canepa on the Yamaha, or Greg Black on the Yoshimura Cert bike. We've had 2 EWC bikes stop on the 29th lap. Randy de Punier it is, who's out on the 99. That's brought Ilya Michalek on the BMW up a spot. And just as I say that, Florian Old is still out there, so the 333 hasn't stopped.
Not yet.
So that was my mistake. So at the moment, it's Nicolo Canepa ahead of Greg Black. They are nose to tail on screen. 22 seconds back is Florian Alt on the 333, the Honda Vilters bike. And then it's Ilya Michalek on the BMW in 4th place, 27 seconds off the lead. Greg Black is still there in 5th on his Kawasaki. And then it's Josh Hook. Josh Hook's up to 6th place now.
I have a feeling that Greg Black's going to get off the bike here after his front stint and be very, very happy with what he's done in this. They knew that, or they had to have suspected that Canepa was going to push really hard from the off.
Well, he's the quickest charger.
Yeah.
So you keep Canepa in check, you keep the other 2 in check.
Exactly. He's, You know, he's never let that gap get too far ahead. It's always looked like he's just been keeping it under control, managing it without getting too carried away with it. We've seen him be aggressive when he needs to be, like when he had to run along the inside there just to get through in that back marker, but not carried away with it. I think that this is, for someone that hasn't spent very much time in the lead, I think that that's about as good a first session start to the race as you could hope for here.
Just saw a glimpse of the pit lane exit here at the top of the Dunlop chicane. And Simon's just pointed out that the Honda Villiers machine was in last time around, so lap 31. Still the top two stay out, and still Ilya Michalek stays out on the BMW. Greg LeBlanc stays out as well. There is the Honda Villiers machine, the 333. Good-looking bike in the Honda colours, that. Of course, formerly on the Yamaha, made the transition to Honda last year. But this pit lane, I just alluded to that as we see. Is that Odendaal?
It's Stephen Odendaal,
yeah,
South African.
Pushing out, yeah. It goes on forever.
It goes forever. Yeah, and you know, looking at the sanctions issued already this week, they have been hot on hitting people with monetary fines, actually, for exceeding the pit lane speed limit. I think there's maybe 8 or 9 teams have been fined €150 each so far. So
race leader in.
Race leader in.
So that is lap 32. Now we look at what Greg Black does.
He's staying out.
I'm going to get my pen out. This is where I start to do some mathematics for later on in the race. But all eyes on the Yacht crew.
And you'd expect a flawless pit stop from these guys. They know exactly what they're doing. They drill it over and over again. And from what we've seen so far, like that's textbook stuff. Absolutely nothing wrong there. And they certainly haven't lost any time as they get back underway with Karl Haneke on the bike. But still, no sign of Greg Black coming in, and they're going to pull out that lead.
And no sign of the National Motors, the Honda, the pole-sitting super stocker, who's now up to 7th overall, leading in class. Everyone else is stopping in the stockers. Nicolo Canepa on screen. Led this race almost for the entirety. Slow away at the start, dropped back to 3rd, but plugged away. Let's try and listen in.
It's not so much rear grip from the beginning. Maybe waiting so long these 2 laps so that I should drop speed.
He basically said it was good. There you go.
Not so much rear grip at the start, which is, you know, pretty much what we expected with how cool it's been. But
they're going 2 laps longer.
They are. That's a huge advantage for Cert. You know, those 2 laps are going to add up by the end of this. We're expecting, what, 900 laps over this race? So you can add 2 laps onto every one of these hour-long stints. You're basically saving yourself a pit stop coming into the race. Or at the very, very least, you're cutting down a full-length pit stop into a very quick splash and dash.
National Motors have been in last time around.
I think we're
currently
seeing
in the stop now in their box.
Are we seeing our first casualty of running out of fuel as the Universe Moto 82 bike pushes home?
At
I
this
think that might be
stage,
the first one to have got it wrong.
That is the walk of shame, isn't it?
At least that one you can blame on someone else. As long as you haven't missed your pit board, you can always put the blame for that one down to your crew.
But it's one of those, the crew will then just say, well, the fuel light was on. Why didn't you take the initiative? I love that. The rider's book of excuses versus the team's efforts to try and get out of stuck. There's your race leader, the Yoshimura set. He's got Randy Depugnet right behind him. Look at Depugnet. His style is brilliant. He'll be backing it in all day.
I think Depugnet is very much capitalising on this. He saw Greg Black come past him a little, well, maybe 2 laps or a lap and a half ago, and he's just slotted in behind him and is using him as a bit of a target to pull out his own lead again.
Right, race leader Yoshimura Cert, Greg Black. That has been a fantastic opening stint for the Frenchman. Watch this Yoshimura Cert team go to work. Very, very trick with the EWC teams. Changing tyres every single stint. You won't see that in the Superstock class. Etienne Masson getting on the machine now. Greg Black passing on some instructions in French as Ilya Michelet brings the BMW in, the factory BMW that's up to second place now.
So the BMW's fuel economy is actually as good as the Suzuki's, which is impressive. You know, we talked about that being a bit of an unknown quantity because we've not really seen them running a full factory effort here before, but that's going to do them a big favour in the long run because, you know, there's not been much attention on them so far. They're not exactly at the sharp end, but I think that they could be a bit of a dark horse for this.
Well, this is it, isn't it? It's not quite the hare and the tortoise, but, you know, being spectacular. Is that the 44, the no limits bike? Because that's just stopped if it is. So the number 44.
It is, it's the Honda No Limits machine.
That bike was leading in class, was the last to stop really, the front runners. So if that bike has gone down, we'll have to look at that. But that's the Honda No Limits team in the Superstock class. One of the front runners we think has gone down. We're looking at Josh Hook, who's still out there. Now, he's the last of the bikes not to have stopped, but that's our point. How, and we'll see a graphic later on in the race, how long you spend in the pit lane is very much what determines whether or not you win this race. It's not just your fastest laps or your purple sectors, it's how long you spend in the pit lane. And if you can go longer on the fuel mileage, that will account to an advantage later on in the race. And so it's really important.
You can work really, really hard and put a lot of risk into it to be 0.1 or 0.2 a lap faster for, you know, for hours and hours and hours, but none of it's going to make up the same amount of time that you'll make up if you can pit stop and save, you know, 30 seconds by doing one stop less. So it makes sense that there's a lot of effort put into that as we see Josh Hook finally rolling it into the pits. And, you know, he's just by lieu of that fuel economy, like right now they're technically the leaders on track even after that crash. Obviously that's going to reset once they switch racers and get back out on track again, but it's just evidence in what we're talking about because they've managed to make up that time. There's actually not that much crash.
So Josh just talking about the front tyre. Be mindful of the front tyre. Make sure you get heat into the front tyre because that's obviously what caused him.
Yeah.
He started to push and what? It was like 5-6 laps in. You know, it wasn't the first or second lap, was it?
No, it wasn't. You would have expected there would have been heat in the tyre by that point, but it still managed to catch him out.
And it's worth saying that, you know, they're not, although they're all on the Bridgestone tyre, they're not necessarily on the same compound. They have different compounds available to them because of the weather conditions that we have here at Le Mans.
Exactly. I think I also heard him say something there about the rear brake, which could be because obviously that crash, it was the right-hand side of the bike that got damaged. So it might have been just a little bit of a warning, be wary of the right foot peg being a bit ground down or something like that. I think you'd rather go down on the right-hand side and risk damaging it than go down on the left and risk the gear change being destroyed or damaged. So I think there might have been a little bit of warning of that passed on too.
Just approaching the 60-minute marker for the first hour completed here at Le Mans, the 47th edition of this iconic race. And you're watching the two machines that have been, well, together the whole of that first hour. Karel Hanneke was just hopping out of Recordemont there onto the start and finish straight. That's hampered his run up to Dunlop, and straight away Etienne Masson up the inside of Karel Hanneke, and there's a lead change out front. The Yoshimura Cert bike ahead of that Yacht machine. So long was Greg Black in the wheel tracks in the Colo Canepa. Now it's the turn of Karel Hanneke to be in the wheel tracks of Etienne Masson. And it was all courtesy of Masson just having to get out of the throttle there coming out of the last corner.
this is a great position to be in for the CERT team. They're looking comfortable. You get the impression that he doesn't really need to lead at this point, Masson. He's found himself in it, but it wasn't really through intention, because they're going to be thinking now at this point they know what they can do in the pit stops. They know that they've got a little bit of an advantage in terms of being out on track a little bit longer. And yeah, surely you always want to build up as much lead as you can. You want a bit of a buffer just in case something goes wrong or you need it later in the race, but they don't need to be the guys doing the chasing at this point.
Greg Black looks cooler and calmer than we do. I mean, he's done almost an hour on a superbike around this Bugatti circuit where there's all but nowhere to rest. And when you talk, oh no, Etienne Masson, one hand off the bar, nose chopped off into Recordement. That's allowed Karel Hanneke back through. And Masson's got to keep his emotions under tap.
That was a little bit just the pit lane endurance number 86 bike just tangling with them. But I think the problem that these two guys have got, Etienne Masson and Karel Hanneke, is that they're fighting for the win, but they've caught a couple of Superstock guys who are fighting for their own position in this race at this point. And, all's fair in love and war. Everybody's is here to race, and whenever there's positions to be traded on track, the factory guys at the front can't just expect everyone to get out of their way.
Masson can't get past this 86 machine either. That's the pit lane endurance bike, and he's gone deep into Museum Corner.
And he's got to be careful as well to keep things under control, like you say, not let the emotion get away from him. You don't want to do something dumb at this point in the race. And
Hanneke's gone wide.
Hanneke's gone wide.
I thought it was, I was just about to say it. So the front two are not having it all their own way, because Hanneke was a long way past Etienne Masson. He was lucky not to collect the back of that machine.
He was lucky that the MotoGP long lap penalty loop was there to give him a slips road to divert into. But both of these guys, it's the same thing. They're both getting frustrated trying to get their way through the Superstock machines, and they're both starting to lose their cool a little bit. This feels like a bit of dangerous territory for these two.
It's the nerves, the adrenaline. They've been watching on. They've seen Canepa, teammate Greg Black, going at it for 60 minutes. You suddenly get on the bike, you're in the thick of it, and it's difficult to bring that down.
You would get the impression that if this was still Greg Black and Nicolo Canepa on the bike at this point, they'd be much cooler and calmer. Things wouldn't be like this.
So Etienne Masson has got the advantage over Karel Hanneke. At the moment, it's Steven Odendaal, the South African, in third on the Honda Viltes, and the BMW of Sylvain Guintoli up to fourth. Two big French names. Well, they've just swapped positions. Randy Depugnet's got past Sylvain Guintoli, but they're fourth and fifth.
It's like a 2007 Grand Prix around here. These two, the two old hands dicing against each other. It's impressive to see Guintoli here on a bike that's really largely unproven in endurance spec, and it almost feels a little bit like cheating for the BMW team that they've brought in this new bike. They've brought in a couple of riders who maybe aren't as experienced. And then they've just decided, we'll throw in a complete dark horse. We'll roll out Sylvain Guintoli to see what he's capable of doing here.
I mean, that's a hell of a trump card, isn't it? Those of you that have played top trumps back in the day. People don't do that anymore, do they? They play on their phones.
My wife is an obsessive Uno fan, right. So that's our card game of choice at home these days.
Yeah, I remember the long motorway journeys, top trumps, Uno, I Spy. Those days are long gone. As we see Karel Hanneke, let's see what he does across the line. 1:38.2 for Etienne Masson last time around. Karel Hanneke a little bit slower. So Karel Hanneke, 0.2 of a second slower than Etienne Masson that time around. And we're going to see what that Yamaha has under the hood now, so to speak, because Etienne Masson's opened the gap up to 1.5 seconds. Steven Odendaal 21 seconds behind in third place on that 333 Honda Vitesse, and the number 5's down again. Mike D'Amelio. And what has happened here? If this is a front-end crash, That was what Josh Hook said, and that's a big crash. Two flat tyres. That bike has been end over end. What has happened here? He's going to tuck the front.
Tuck the front, and that's a fast crash.
So it's not the right. That's Josh Hook and Mike D'Amelio down in a handful of laps with that FCC TSR bike, and they said, watch the front tyre to Mike D'Amelio. He's gone down at Chemin-Neuf. I mean, that could, well, I don't think it's quite game over yet, but that, in terms of anything out of this race, incredible drama here. The FCC TSR Honda bike, 65 minutes in, and that's Mike D'Amelio, and shades of his horrible debut that he made here all those years ago, and he's righted the wrongs since then, of course. A real stalwart of endurance racing, a real professional, but that is a horrible sight for the Honda fans. And Mike D'Amelio trudges off that bike with two flat tyres. I mean, the only advantage is he's near the pit lane entrance there, but it's game over for FCC TSR Honda in terms of a race victory here. And you can see the look on their faces. So much has gone into the preparation, the pre-season. Here we are, round one of a World Championship at Le Mans. And after 65 minutes, that bike's been down the road twice.
I mean, they got lucky with the first crash. We said at the time that it was a good time to fall in the grand scheme of things. This one, on the other hand, there's a lot of damage. Like, that bike went end over end maybe 10 or 12 times in the gravel trap. They got lucky with the first one because it slid across the asphalt. The second one, the second it touched the gravel trap, it just annihilated itself.
And it's so strange to watch someone tuck the front there. Normally, you can stand it up if you're going wide. We go and hear from Greg Black now.
Greg, talk me through that first stint, track conditions and how the bike's feeling.
Yeah, it was a good first stint. The conditions, we weren't really sure because of the quite cold wind out there. So I was pretty cautious in the first few laps. We got a good start of the race. I heard the Yamaha was just behind me, so actually kind of let him past because I thought it'd be good to see his pace. And I saw in testing Niccolo was quite fast, so I preferred for security staying behind, and he got a really good pace out there. So just stayed nice and relaxed behind him. Then we caught up the back markers, so it was a bit of a cat and mouse game, sort of him pulling away and me catching him up. But yeah, we tried to stay relaxed, do no mistake. I saw we pulled away from the other riders on the third place, so that was pretty good. So now the race is on. Our teammates are doing well, so 24 hours there.
It looked like there was a 2-lap difference at one point.
Yeah, actually, I tried to save some fuel behind Niccolo, so that seemed to work.
Well, listen, thanks for speaking to me and good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
I love that. Is that a little bit of mind games there as we see Karel Hanneke catching back up to Etienne Massot? But I love what he just said, and you picked up on it straight away. Was he, excuse me, just trying to save fuel? Or was he there because Canepa was just very quick as well in that opening stint?
Getting a great slow-mo shot here that just shows what I was talking about at the start, where you can see all the components on the left-hand side of the bike are bright green, whereas all the equivalent on the right-hand side of the start bike are red, and that's the starboard port thing. Just one of those little tricks that they've come up with to ease the job of the mechanics in the middle of the night, whenever they're tired, whenever their brain's a bit addled from sleep deprivation and too much caffeine, just to remind them what goes where. It's that's what whenever we say that luck is something you manufacture, that's an example of that CERT team really building some luck for themselves.
Nothing is left to chance at Yoshimura CERT, nor any of the top teams up this Endurance World Championship pit lane, as we see the front two who've been nose to tail throughout this opening hour and a bit, still at it, up at Dunlop chicane. 42 laps completed. It's Yoshimura CERT ahead of the Yamaha, then the Honda Viltes bike, the KM99 of Randy de Pugna in fourth place, ahead of the BMW of Sylvain Guintoli. There's 2.8 seconds between the two French legends. Then it is the number 11 bike, the Kawasaki WeBike Trickstar machine of Christian Gamarino in sixth. The top super stocker is the National Motors bike, Sebastian Suchet. Now he's on the bike ahead of Hannes Sumer, and they are 8th and 9th together. And the Sapieres-Pompier machine, the first time we've heard that, Enzo de la Vega on that bike. The 18 machine, 10th overall. And that Sapieres-Pompier bike's been really quick over the years here, but just hasn't quite had the luck. Sapieres-Pompier translates to, you know, the fire service, if you like. But these riders, okay, they've got professional riders on the bike now, but it started off as the riders that used to carry all of the organs and the blood and everything like that around the motorway network in France to get it to those emergency departments when it was needed.
I think quite a few of the team are still active French firefighters, much like the national moto team are all roadside assistance mechanics. I think there's quite a few active French firefighters within that squad. I mean, who else would you rather have holding your fire extinguisher in pit lane than a French fireman, right?
Yeah, if there is any drama in that garage, no need to rush towards it. I think they've got it covered. So it's Suzuki, Yacht, Yamaha and Honda. 3 different manufacturers in the top 3 out front. 22 seconds separate the top 3. 2/10 separate the top 2. And then, of course, in the Super Stockers, Honda leading. And then you got the number 9 machine in 2nd place, the Tecmas BMW. And then the Sapieres-Pompier bike in 3rd place in class, the Yamaha. So 3 different manufacturers in the top 3 as well in the Super Stockers, and that's what brings this Endurance World Championship alive as the FCC TSR Honda team await their bike. I think, and I'm not a genius, but the fact that we're watching a white van arrive back to the paddock, I think their bike's in the back of that.
I would hope so, otherwise it's a bit of a strange camera shot that we're currently getting of a van running through the very, very crowded fan areas at Le Mans.
And there's the tunnel that leads out underneath the track here, this banked right-hander, to the Techno Park. And I was telling you the story, my first ever trip to this 24 Heures de Mans, 1999. And I was a young racing driver living in Le Mans with peroxide blonde hair, and I thought it would be a good idea to go and see what this was all about on my 50cc scooter. Got stopped in that tunnel, and someone poured a pint of beer over my head, surrounded me, and made me do a rolling burnout whilst they lifted the rear wheel up of my 50cc scooter. I survived to tell the tale.
One of the great things about Le Mans that makes it really, really unique, and that shot of the van coming back with the FCC TSR bike really highlighted it, is how close you can get to the action as a fan. In a lot of circuits, the whole paddock and pits area is very isolated, very cut off. Here you can get right up against it whenever you come as a spectator, to the absolute detriment sometimes of life for those who have to work in the paddock. I know there's a story of a certain Grand Prix racer one night who was leaving the circuit encountered a large group of slightly intoxicated Frenchmen who managed to write off his hire car by getting on the roof of it and bouncing on it like a bouncy castle, enough to cave the roof in. It's all part of the fun and games at Le Mans. It's what everyone expects when we go there. You know that it's going to be absolutely just mayhem, but it's hard to come away without a smile on your face at it.
Well, you just heard the atmosphere at the start as well, with the Marseillaise ringing out along the start and finish straight, and the way that the audible impact of the bikes resonates up and down this start and finish straight with the variations of the grandstands, that kind of thing. Something magical, and you've got the campsites just off to the right-hand side there as we look down the start and finish straight. It really is a spectacle, this, and the characters that you get and the mayhem and everything that goes on, and the social media warnings in the weeks leading up to this race saying that, you know, you're not going to be allowed to do this, you're not going to be allowed to do that. And I said on my post, it's one thing offering those directives, but enforcing them is a completely different kettle of fish.
It's certainly the only race in the world where they have to issue a directive ahead of the race informing you that this year it will be illegal to bring motorcycles for the explicit purpose of destroying them.
Exactly.
That's generally the job of racers,
yeah,
and not fans in the campsite. I always feel really bad for these guys on the bikes. Come sort of 8 or 9 o'clock, around that back section of the track where you're quite near to the campsites in the woods just off to your left, because you start getting the smell of barbecues coming through. The sun's setting, it looks lovely. They've got a long, dark, cold night ahead of them, and someone's, you know, frying off some sausages.
The onions. There we go, at the top of the pit lane now, the FCC TSR Honda bike looking extremely second-hand. It's a sight that the Honda fans did not want to see. They have, of course, got the Honda Vintes bike still in third place, but that FCC TSR Honda bike now being rolled back to the garage.
The FCC TSR bike is now all the way down in 44th place, 8 laps off the lead. I mean, that's heartbreaking for a team that looked like they were going to fight for the podium in this race, had that crash, and then managed to regroup and get right back into the fight again, only to see themselves in this position. There's a bit of a tense debrief going on with a rather irate-looking Mike DiMeglio. And I'm not surprised that he's a little bit upset about that, because that was a strange crash.
Well, he had the warning, but when you go down that early at Chemin-Aubert, it will have taken him by surprise. I mean, there's one thing heeding that warning, and there's another thing just being, as we just see there, Karel Hanneke getting squeezed off on the outside by the 36 machine. But it's a whole another thing when you think you're riding within yourself, you think you're riding slowly, and you still drop the bike, as we see again the FCC TSR Honda team manager being summoned to race control just to make things even worse for that crew. And you can see the National Motors squad. This is what I was talking about, clapping, and look, the National Motors team members helping to push that FCC TSR bike in, and that's the camaraderie that you get in endurance racing, because, you know, for a lot of these teams and riders now, it becomes about completing the challenge as opposed to going home with silverware. And the emotive stories and the narratives that we talked about before the race start to play out up and down the pit lane. So these team members now, look, they're not down in the dumps. They're not just looking at the bike. They are now in a fight to get this bike to the summit, if you like.
And this is one of the teams at the sharp end of the championship. This is one of the teams that absolutely knows how to deal with this. So what they'll have done, I'd imagine, is someone will have been to that van, that recovery truck, and have seen the bike as soon as they get a chance to look at it. They won't have helped them push it back. They'll have ran down to the garage, told them what's broken, and there'll be kits sitting in boxes in the back of the pits. With one will be labelled replacement dash, one will be labelled replacement brake system. They'll just pull out those kits and they'll plug and play them in so that they can do this change and repair this crash damage as quick as possible.
And what's amazing is how quickly everything quick releases. The bars, the gear linkage, you know, there's so much on these bikes, not just from the pit lane aspect, but from the repair aspect, because they almost plan for these eventualities. There's so many aspects that come apart so quickly in order to get a bike that looks that destroyed back into the race in the time that they do.
I feel like if there's ever an adage that applies to endurance racing, it's the one about prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Exactly that. Well, here's their story so far. Josh Hook tucked the front at Recordemont early in the race. He would drop down to 26th. He recovered all the way up to 6th. Then he handed over to Mike DiMeglio, who went end over end over end on the entry to Chemin-Aubert on, I think, his 3rd lap on that bike after the stop. They managed to get the bike recovered to the top of the pit lane. It's now in the pit box, and we'll see just how long that FCC TSR bike spends in that pit box before they can get it out. And I hope they can. As you can see, the bike already stripped bare. This is now a good point to say that we are on X, or Twitter as it was formerly known, at Tom Gaymor, Gaymor, at Den KMIT, so Denkmit for Simon Patterson as we see the Matisse off again. We saw that in trouble earlier on in the race. The Matisse with its unconventional front steering arms now parked in the gravel here. But yeah, you can get in touch on X and Twitter. So Denkmit is Simon Patterson. Tweet in any questions that you may have. Thanks for everyone who's got in touch so far. Jan, hashtag Giants Pride, has got in touch. I think you're watching from Canada, or I might be wrong. No, that's Weber Autosports. Drew Weber getting in touch, watching from Canada. Who was the last Canadian on the podium in EWC? Still waiting for an answer. I'll have to look that up.
That's a tough one.
So yeah, Jan, let us know where you're watching from. Frankie82's got in touch. Why doesn't EWC have recovery back to the pits? It does. You just got to be lucky enough to hitch a ride. It depends on what element of the track you crash the bike at and how you can get back. Lee Spelzini's got in touch. It's great to hear from on you on the commentary. Not even had the first pit stops. Love endurance racing. Yes, we do as well. I think Jorg Reich's got in touch as well. Good to hear from you. And in my messages, Nick Green, 916, getting in touch. How's Michael Dunlop getting on? Well, he is 60 at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in class. Going very nicely indeed.
Yeah, I think Michael's going to be really pleased with his pace so far, actually. This is, so he was second out in the bike, and he's, to be fair, he's not quite as fast as some of the guys around him, but whenever you look at the guys around him, he's following really big names at the minute. So for someone who's here, you know, he's here obviously to try and get a good result, because everyone is, that's racing, but he's also here to prepare for TT, and he's going to be of a slightly different attitude to it. He's going to be a little bit more steady, a little bit more comfortable at this point.
Well, the front two still nose to tail. Yoshimura Cert ahead of the Yamaha. And Jan has got back in touch on Twitter, watching from Bremen in northern Germany. Well, jumping to conclusions here, but could be a BMW fan. Yeah, some strong German riders in this year's championship as well.
Bremen's a long way from Munich, though.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
So maybe not. So I've done a really quick little bit of research, though, just to...
Well, let's go down and hear from Mike D'Amelio, then we'll hear from Simon's research.
Mike, we saw that when Josh came back with the bike, he was complaining about the front tire. Can you explain us what really happened to you?
Yeah, he told me that to take care with the front, so I was very taking care. But also we don't have grip on the rear. So very strange, I was not pushing because with the full tank full in the start, we know that you need to manage the braking. So I was taking care also to overtake the guys and arrive in Schmerbe. I lose the front and I was, not accepting, just put little banking, front lift. So yeah, now it's strange, we need to check trouble. We can not go softer with the softer compound because the track is still hot, but it's the first time we get this feeling with the tire on the week, so quite hard at this moment.
And do you think the team can repair the bike on time?
Yeah, we'll try to do what we can, and yes, the race is still long. It's not good to start like this, but yeah, we keep coming.
Well, thank you, Mike, and good luck.
Yeah, downbeat Mike D'Amelio there. I get the impression that he just didn't see that coming. He was taking care of the front tyre, but there was just no grip from the front of that FCC TSR Honda. It's got to be a compound or a pressure.
Yeah, whenever you saw both of them caught out so unawares by it, both him and Josh Hook, it makes me think that maybe they were a little bit low in the pressure for the temperature, something like that. And it's just not quite been working correctly for them, and they've paid the price for it not once but twice now.
Right, do you have an answer for our Canadian friend?
Well, I had one answer, but I think I think our fellow commentator Dave Goddard, who's going to jump on in a little bit and take over from us, has been even more specific than me, because looking back through the results, the third place finisher in the 1990 championship was none other than Miguel Duhamel, Canadian superbike rider. But Dave has come back and said that Miguel was also on the podium in 1992. So he doesn't say which race, but that's about as specific, I think, as we can go, eh?
Well, there we have an answer. It didn't come from me. It came through Dave Goddard and Simon Patterson.
That's very much a case of you denying all responsibility in case it's wrong, Tom. I know your game.
We've just seen Stephen Odendahl just run a little bit wide into the bank right-hander in the last sector here of this Bugatti circuit. Didn't lose too much time, though. He comes across the line, still in third place. And I said it when it stopped, that Honda Voltaires looks really good in that full factory livery. He's 24 seconds off of the race lead. 137.5 last time around, about a second off Karel Hanneke. Karel Hanneke still in the wheel tracks of Etienne Masson. Now, we heard from Greg Black, he said, I was saving fuel, hold up behind Nicolo Canepa. Trying to say he was quicker than him, didn't want to pass. Now we've got Karel Hanneke hold up behind of Etienne Masson. Is he trying to do the same? And what will we see in terms of stint length this time around? Can the Yamaha get a lap back by sitting in the wheel tracks of the Yoshimura Cert bike?
There's definitely a benefit to being the follower. Even though this is a circuit that doesn't have the big long straights of somewhere like, say, Paul Ricard, where we had later in the year for the Ball d'Or, there's still an advantage to being in the slipstream and being able to eke out a little bit of an advantage from that. However, I don't think there's 2 laps of an advantage. I think that maybe Greg was just playing a little bit of mind games with those comments, because I think maybe they know that the Suzuki's get a bit extra in terms of legs over the course of the full hour-long stint in the bike, or just shy of that they did. So I think we'll find out in about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less, because we'll get an idea of when they're going to pit stop. But I still wouldn't be surprised if the Suzuki does at least 1 lap more than the Yamaha behind it whenever it comes to the next stop.
Pit lane actions of the FCC TSR crew now being reviewed. So the team manager has been up to race control twice now, and that does not bear well for Toru Suzuki. So Suzuki-san, who's going to be up there trying to explain away to the race director what exactly was going on, as we get our first glimpse of Randy Depugne aboard the KM99 machine. So
he's, we saw him running with those leading duo earlier on in their stint, and really capitalising on it to pull out a bit of a gap, and he's done well out of it, because he's broken that toe back to Sylvain Cantoli now to 9 seconds. He's done well with that. He's a bit out on his own in terms of space around him on either side, but he's comfortable, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not he can maybe just start to close down Odendahl a little bit. Obviously, both super talented riders. Odendahl, an ex-European Moto2 champion, Depugne, ex-MotoGP rider with a really impressive CV there. But Depugne, you would like to think, has a little bit of an advantage at this, especially with his endurance experience over the last few years.
Factory BMW squad, the number 37, Sylvain Cantoli. Now he's dropped a further, he's 11 seconds now shy. Yeah. So he's quite a lot slower.
He's 1.5 seconds slower. He's a 1.5 laps slower than Depugne in front of him now, which is not really what we expected at all.
It's interesting because that BMW just doesn't seem to have the outright pace. Now we know it's a quick machine, it's on the Dunlop shod tyre, so don't forget the bikes around it are on different tyres. The 99 machine is also on a Dunlop though, so that does
that neuters that argument a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah,
does neutralise it a bit. But the Honda Voltaires bikes on the Pirelli, and then the 2 lead bikes on the Bridgestone. But I'm sure Sylvain, who's got out ahead of Randy Depugnier in the stops, will be disappointed to drop that far back. 13 seconds so far in this stint he's dropped behind Randy Depugnier. And Randy Depugnier's put his fastest lap in, and the fastest lap of the team so far that time around, the 1:36.6. Now, just to give you an indication, that's quicker than anyone last time around. Like anyone on the circuit.
By quite a bit as
quite
well.
A bit,
by sort of half a second.
So Randy Depugnier on the Yamaha,
he's
on the Dunlop tyres, he's flying.
Coming for Odendaal. Man, a Depugnier podium.
If
that
anyone
would be a
can,
sight.
Randy Depugnier can. He's just effervescent on the motorbike, isn't he?
It's strange in many ways how you think of motorbike racing as a young man's sport. But there's a few old hands at this here, just still making it work for themselves. One that I've been watching quite a bit further down the grid, just slowly picking his way forward, is, I can legitimately call Chris Walker a veteran without him taking offence to it, considering how long he's been around on the number 97 bike, up to P23, and just steadily away there, steadily picking his way forward.
52 years young, Chris Walker.
Yeah, we can call him a veteran and Chris won't be offended by that. Plus, he can't hear us anyway, he's on the bike, so...
BSB and World Superbike race winner, of course. And that leads me nicely into saying Chris Stevens has got in touch on X, saying, how are the ADS boys doing? Platty, Chris Walker, Joe Ackroyd, Stefan Hill. Yeah, Joe Ackroyd was the reserve rider on the Matisse. Joe has commentated here for a couple of races. Now back out at Le Mans and racing for the ADS team. Rode him warm up this morning once Matisse didn't need him, and he's on that bike. But Chris Walker out at the moment, and well, he's been going very well so far. He's 23rd overall, and they're in the top 10 in class as well. Now, given how many World Cup bikes there are here, that's an impressive effort. 41 machine has just stopped. Is that the Avio bike again?
Yeah.
They stopped early the first time, didn't they? Is that the Aprilia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other benefit, of course, of this new system where the Superstock teams are allowed to run 4 riders in the race is that it actually gives an opportunity for some of the green wristband guys to get a race in, because not all of the Superstock teams will have brought 4 riders. All of the teams at the real sharp end will have, but those guys aren't needed once we complete warm-up on Sunday morning, and it gives an opportunity for some of them to maybe find a spot elsewhere and maybe unexpectedly get a 24-hour race in.
And of course, with the spectrum of talent, ability, age, it's hard to do it with 3 riders. So from a fitness perspective, it actually makes sense, makes it more inclusive, doesn't it, to have 4 riders for the World Cup squad.
I'd imagine 52-year-old Chris Walker is delighted that they signed Joe Ackroyd to come and join them as the 4th rider this one.
Exactly that. The Team Sapir-Pompier machine just flashing through your screen. 3rd in class, 10th overall. Enzo Della Vega aboard that bike. That's a very Italian-sounding Frenchman. And he's got Hannes Soma ahead of him, the Estonian, on the BMW. 4 seconds back, that BMW is to the race lead. Sebastian Suchet on the National Motors bike is still out there, the number 55 machine.
And former British Grand Prix rider Danny Webb just tucked in behind him on the 777 Wojciech machine.
Now that's the bike that's got Gino Ria on. Kevin Manfredi started that bike as well. And Gino said, before, he said, listen, we're going for a podium. And when I spoke to him at the beginning of the week, because don't forget, it's the first time that Gino's been back in a racing environment since his crash at Suzuka in 2022, the crash that we thought had really claimed his life.
Yeah.
And he's fought back from a head injury and all kinds of different physical challenges as well, to come back here. And before he'd been out in testing, he'd only really ridden on the same circuit in Spain. And this is actually, as we went into the official classification and the official qualifying, the first time that the Vocek team have had the race bike with them, because when they did the open test, it was actually a test bike that they're on. It wasn't they hadn't had delivery of their Honda. So they're still learning. And Gino, you know, back in a race environment with the likes of Kevin Manfredi, Danny Webb, they're doing a fantastic job on that machine.
I mean, when we spoke to Gino, when I first spoke to him after that crash, after that huge, horrible Suzuka crash, he was of the impression back then that his racing career, his racing days were behind him because of how serious it had been. So to see him, you know, back on the grid, back ready to race here is something really special.
Yeah, it is, definitely. And he came and did some commentary with us as well. He's always a wealth of knowledge, fountain of information. As we see the National Motors bike just ahead of your race leader, the Yoshimura Surte, Etienne Masson. 3.1 seconds. So something's happened to Karel Hanneke, whether or not it's traffic or he's made a mistake. Karel Hanneke now 3.1 seconds behind Etienne Masson. These are two powerhouses, aren't they? The Yoshimura Surte squad and the Yamaha slugging it out at the front here for overall honours. Okay, we're only 90 minutes into this 24-hour race. It's been a titanic battle already.
There's been so many teams have come and gone from the sharp end of this championship over the years, and then there's been the two that have been the rocks that have anchored it. You know, it's been Yart and Surte for so long now, and it's you know, they never at times seem to earn the credit that they deserved for their performances, because you would get these factory teams that would come in and the attention would go on them and they'd achieve a few results and then it would disappear again. So to see these two at the sharp end is fantastic. To see them really ruling the championship at the minute, you know.
And it just shows you how challenging endurance racing is. It's not, you know, just anybody who can turn a quick lap on a motorbike, getting on it and doing a good job. We've seen so many former Grand Prix World Superbike riders come in, throw it down the road, not being able to do it over a green flag average. It's so complex. There's so much to it. The back markers, of course, the machinery as well, ebbs and flows throughout the race. You know, 1 minute the brake lever's up there, the next minute the foot pegs sawn up. You know, every time you get on it, it's changed. The track changes. It's really complex and challenging.
If we've learned anything, it's that being a super fast rider is actually maybe not what you want, because it tends to skew things. It tends to, you know, it never ends well whenever they bring in these superstar riders. It's something that you really see, obviously, every year whenever we go to Suzuka, where the factories like to roll out really big names. You know, we've seen Jonathan Ray, we've seen Jack Miller, we've seen Casey Stoner, but it doesn't work.
Casey didn't fancy it at Suzuka after that.
Well, after the, yeah. The less said about the problems with the gearbox and that particular variation of Honda Fireblade, the better, I think.
Exactly that. But no, listen, you're absolutely right. And it's also, you need the heart, the size of a lion to compete in this, because so many riders have enjoyed their first 24-hour race, and then you hear their interview and they're so buoyant after their first stint, and then you get that interview at 7 in the morning when they're like on their fourth stint, and you know their face has dropped, and it then goes to, you can see they're thinking, I don't think I can do another stint, but you get back out there and you do it, and it is challenging. Dan Linfoot will be sort of almost experiencing that, and when you are under so much scrutiny at Yoshimura Surte, it's going to be really interesting to see, and that's why the likes of Terry Reimer, you know, I mean, that chap, he'd pick the bike up and put it on his back and run with it if he had to, you know.
I remember another veteran British endurance racer, Steve Plater, telling me a few years ago that the most bittersweet feeling in the world was seeing the sun come up at Le Mans, because you knew that the sun was coming up, the night was done, it was going to get warmer, the track was going to improve, and then you had the realization that there was still 9 hours left of the race.
The 99 in from 4th place. Jeremy Guarnoni jumping on that machine, taking over from Randy De Pugna. Now, Jeremy Guarnoni's a very, very quick rider indeed. They've got a really quick stable, that KM99
Yeah,
squad.
they do. As a team that's never really been kind of established at the sharp end, they've turned up this year with a real strong lineup. And we talk about the factory teams, we talk about the guys you expect to see at the sharp end, but one of the great things about endurance racing is that there's always a possibility for one of these satellite squads to just sneak their way in to a decent result here and there and upset things.
What has happened here to the Honda Vitesse bike? Stephen Odendahl, has he been down or has he run out of fuel? Big issues here for that 333.